I've always been used because I'm a good guy. And women, when they meet me, they say, I can use this son of a bitch. I push him around. He's an easygoing guy. So I do it. But finally I get to resent it a bit.
What do you resent?
Just being pushed.
Pushed?
Yeah.
There's never been a time in history where billions of people are controlled as easily as they are controlled today. The techniques are perfect pretty well. And government too, and all the agencies of governments have instant access to the tapping in to your processes of your own thinking, your mind, and so on through your electronic media. Everyone puts every single thought out there on either on their telephone or they're tweeting or whatever else they're doing. And there's nothing about you that's really unknown. The big boys know by playing their war games how you react in various situations by playing with a virtual you. And it's pretty well accurate. And when you really think about the long, long history we've all been given in different countries of people fighting for rights and fighting for privacy and fighting to have basic rights even. Basic rights included privacy, and how easily they gave them all up in no time at all for this thing called convenience. So really, in other words, every tyrant in history, if they'd only had the technology they have today, that he could have been at the top of the tree and the people wouldn't mind and probably accept them and be quite happy with a tyrant at the very, very top. Because we really are in a form of tyranny already, in fact, when you're treated like so many numbers on a database, and that's how you are with your social insurance numbers and your little name next to it. That's what you are. You're just a number, basically. And the authorities don't care about you at all as long as you pay up all that you're due to pay up and behave yourself and do what you're told. That's all they care about. And they want to know why you're not doing what you're told. If you start to think for yourself, they want to know why you're starting to think for yourself. That means it could be contagious.
We're developing a society because of all of these different toxins known to affect brain function. We're seeing a society that not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society. So everyone's sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government because they can't excel. We have these people of lower IQ who are totally dependent. Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out. And that's what they want. So, you can kind of piece it together as to why they are so insistent in spending so many hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda money to dumb down society.
And they got to catch it and stop it, right? Nip it in the bud, basically. And I'm not kidding about this because we live in an amazing world of total control. Total control. I've mentioned before, and many have mentioned long before me, before I came along, that they'd worked for big agencies within governments to find ways of controlling the peasantry, basically, the people. And they do call them peasantry at the top. Yes, they do. And how to manage them and manipulate them. And they would always discuss the problems they had with the people, demanding this or demanding that. And so why can't they just be happy and shut up and procreate and breed and all the rest of it and then play themselves, just play themselves. Well, again, they didn't have all the technologies to give us back then to make us happy to pass the time away playing ourselves. But today, the people are quite content to just pass away the time. And that's all they're doing. They're putting in time until they die. being entertained and passing trivia amongst each other. And what's so interesting to me, because I've studied psychology and sociology and all the other ologies out there pretty well, to do with how those at the top manage whole populations. And I've read so many other articles where they talk about the depersonalization process of cities, for instance, and all the fallout the people, normal human beings will find living in overcrowded cities. The depersonalization process, where you feel you're literally one of many, many ants and you don't matter anymore. You start to lose your own little bit of ego that keeps you alive. That little bit, not the overblown, exaggerated ego, but that little bit that keeps you going. Because you feel unimportant, and that of course leads to all kinds of things, neurosis or depressions and drugs even with many youngsters. We're living in an advanced system of learning from, or an advanced system which found all the pitfalls out by watching and creating the Nazi era, and before that the communist era, by trying different things on the general public. In China too, mind you, and watching how different peoples will adapt, and how to cajole them into accepting a system of overcrowding and less rights, etc. So we're in the super Soviet, you might say. The old Soviet system basically stuck. The cog in the wheel basically got stuck, and it didn't go any further. The idealism of communism was a perfectly trained and perfectly bred society, right down eventually to be selected for breeding, but where the offspring wouldn't need money, and everybody would simply, no one would be competing against anyone else in the system, for the people, that is. Again, just like Charles Galton Darwin, they'd have the wild men at the top running it all, who must retain all their faculties, but the general people wouldn't have to, because the state would be making all their decisions for them. That's what Charles Galton Darwin wanted for Britain, Europe, and the rest of the world. So the super Soviet system, you'd walk into a big factory type warehouse, supermarket, and you'd only take what you needed and nothing else. That'd be the perfect Soviet man or woman. They wouldn't think beyond that. And so this perfect, fantastical utopia, of course, could never materialize in any natural way, because we're all born with survival instincts, and in some people they get more deviant than others, and they become the tyrants who want it all for themselves. Therefore, they'd have to be altered genetically, and with the aid of drugs, and so on. And right now we seem to be in the era where all of these techniques are being used at the same time. We can see that the incredible amounts of money, your tax money of course, that goes into creating new kinds of genetically modified food. And don't think for an instance just to get a better spud or a better carrot. There's other scientific studies being done on these things all the time, and it's also to see if they can modify you. Obviously, of course it is, and to make you more passive as a society, or even more effeminate as a masculine group, with the biased phenotypes in your food, and your soft drinks and everything else too, that was getting promoted heavily, still is getting promoted heavily, and they know what it does to your hormonal system. We're constantly being tampered with all the time, and it's not by accident. It truly is not by accident that's being done. We live in a society, as I say, where the elite have always wondered how to gain pretty well perfect control over all of us at all times. What they've settled on at the moment, this transitory phase, is simply the data collection daily from you, that you put up yourself, for them to grab from the Ethernet, etc. and add it to your personality profile, your history, etc., etc. And all these games running automatically on you to see how you would react in certain situations. It's perfect control. I've mentioned before that really good series I did in Britain called The Last Enemy, because the last enemy is you. Once you're tamed and totally controlled, there's nothing you can do that would upset the apple cart or annoy anyone above you, for that matter. And we certainly do have those above us. We've never lived in an age, as I say, where the super Soviet were boastful about their techniques, in fact. They became very overconfident to an extent on their own abilities to manage all of us. They've had so many meetings at the United Nations about how to alter our opinions on the mandates for the future and get us all ready to accept the mandates for the future by making things approved by social approval or social disapproval. A very great technique, and they can shame you into just going along with the flow. And most folk will go along with the flow rather than be shamed by the mass, even if the mass is pretty ignorant. That's just the way it is. You'll find most people will go along with the masses anyway, because they like to please their bosses. And I really mean that too.